Captain Dong-Su stared at the sensor display with tired eyes. 3 years commanding the Coalition patrol vessel Harmonies. Edge had taught him that deep space was mostly empty darkness and broken dreams. His crew of 47 beings from 12 different species had grown used to the routine. Patrol the outer rim, check for pirates, file reports, and try not to go crazy from boredom. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on long-range sensors," called Commander Hanul from the tactical station. Her blue-scaled hands danced across the controls with practiced ease. As a Zentari, she had natural talent for reading energy patterns that most species missed. Dong-Su pushed himself up from his command chair and walked over to look at her screen. The display showed mostly empty space, with the usual background radiation and distant star signatures. But there was something else. A small blip that shouldn't exist. "What am I looking at?" he asked. Hanul pointed to a section of space that should have been completely empty. "Energy bloom, sir. Big one. It appeared about 30 seconds ago in the Terran graveyard." Every being on the bridge went quiet. The Terran graveyard was a place nobody talked about unless they had to. 300 years ago, it had been the site of humanity's last stand against some unknown enemy. Ships from a dozen species had gone to investigate what happened to the humans after they all went silent. None came back. The Coalition had declared the entire sector off limits and tried to forget it existed. "Are you sure about the location?" Dong-Su asked, though he already knew Hanul didn't make mistakes with sensor readings. "Confirmed, sir. Dead center of the restricted zone. The energy readings are ... unusual." Dong-Su looked at the navigation display. They were only 2 hours away from the graveyard's edge at current speed. Coalition protocol said to report strange readings and wait for orders. But something about this felt different. The energy signature was growing stronger by the minute. "Take us closer," he ordered. "But keep us outside the restricted zone boundary?" The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Lieutenant Tae-young, their communications officer, cleared his throat. "Sir, regulations state that any approach to the Terran graveyard requires approval from Coalition High Command." "I know the regulations, Lieutenant. I'm not ordering us into restricted space. We're going to observe from a safe distance." As the Harmony's edge changed course, Dong-Su felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Real curiosity mixed with genuine fear. The energy readings were unlike anything in the Coalition database. They weren't following known patterns for stellar phenomena, ship drives, or weapon signatures. "Captain," Hanul called out, her voice tight with concern. "The energy bloom is expanding. And it's getting organized." "What do you mean, organized?" "The patterns are becoming more complex, like something is forming." Dong-Su returned to his command chair and activated the main viewer. The screen showed the edge of the Terran graveyard, a region of space that looked normal but felt wrong to anyone who stared at it too long. Ancient debris fields floated in the darkness, the remains of ships from species that no longer existed. Then he saw it. A point of light appeared in the center of the restricted zone. At first, it looked like a new star being born. But stars didn't form that quickly, and they certainly didn't pulse with regular rhythms like a heartbeat. "Sir," whispered Engineer Bio Young from the back of the bridge, "that's not natural." The light grew brighter and began to take shape. What had started as a simple point was becoming something vast and complex. Curves of energy traced patterns in the void like someone drawing with pure light. The patterns were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Hanul, are you recording this?" Dong-Su asked. "Everything, sir. But our sensors are having trouble processing the data. Whatever that is, it's operating on principles we don't understand." The light show continued for another 10 minutes. The energy patterns grew more solid with each passing moment. Dong-Su found himself holding his breath as the truth became clear. Something was materializing in the graveyard. Something enormous. When the light finally faded, they could see what had been hidden inside it. A ship. But calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a rock. The vessel stretched across space like a floating city. Its hull was dark gray metal scarred by battles no living being remembered. Strange symbols covered its surface and energy flowed along channels that seemed to shift and move as they watched. "Blessed ancestors," whispered Hanul. "How big is that thing?" Bo Young's fingers flew over his console. "Initial scans show. This can't be right." Length 47 kilometers. Width 15 kilometers. Height 8 kilometers. Mass readings are off the scale. Dongsu felt his mouth go dry. The largest ships in the Coalition fleet were barely 3 kilometers long. This monster was 15 times bigger than anything they had ever built. "Can you identify the design?" he asked, though he was starting to suspect the answer. Hanul ran the ship's profile through every database they had. One by one, the results came back negative. No match in Coalition records. No match in ancient archives. No match in archaeological databases. Then she tried one more search, and her face went pale. "Sir, there's a partial match in the historical files. The general shape and some of the hull markings, they're similar to ancient human designs." "That's impossible," said Tae-young. "Human ships were tiny. The biggest one ever recorded was maybe 2 kilometers long." "This is different," Hanul said, staring at her readings. "The materials, the energy signatures, even the way it exists in space. This isn't just a big human ship. This is something else entirely." The massive vessel hung motionless in the void, as if it was studying its surroundings. No lights moved on its hull. No communications signals came from its direction. It simply existed, dark and silent and impossible. "Sir," called out Navigation Officer Min SEO, "we're receiving a standard identification ping. The ship is ... It's trying to communicate." Dongsu's heart started beating faster. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and text appeared in the common Coalition language. Simple words that changed everything. HSS Eternal Phoenix Terran Stellar Navy Captain Jinne Commanding Status Operational Mission Classifidmus Humanity has RETURNID. Bridge fell completely silent. Dongsu stared at the words until his eyes began to water. Humanity had been gone for 3 centuries. Their colonies were empty. Their worlds were divided among Coalition species. Everyone knew humans were either extinct or reduced to primitive survivors on forgotten worlds. But this ship was here. It was real, and it was definitely human. "Captain," Hanul said quietly, "there's something else. I'm detecting smaller vessels launching from the big ship. Hundreds of them." On the main screen, tiny points of light began streaming away from the massive vessel. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. But these weren't animals. They were ships, and they were heading in all directions. "Where are they going?" Dongsu asked. Min SEO checked the navigation plots. "Everywhere, sir. They're spreading out across the entire sector. Some are heading for the core worlds, others toward the outer colonies. They're going to every system that used to be human." Dongsu realized he was witnessing something that would change the galaxy forever. The humans weren't just back. They were making a statement. After 3 centuries of silence, they wanted everyone to know they had returned. "Hanul, send an immediate message to Coalition High Command. Priority Alpha, tell them." He paused, trying to find words for something impossible. "Tell them the humans are back. And they're not the same humans who left." Admiral Biorem sat in her command chair reading the report for the 5th time. Each time she hoped the words would somehow change, but they remained the same. Captain Dongsu had found something impossible in the Terran graveyard. A human ship, 47 kilometers long. A ship that shouldn't exist. The massive draconian female had commanded Coalition forces for 20 years. She had seen pirates, rebels, ancient ruins, and space monsters. But nothing had prepared her for this report. Humans were supposed to be gone, finished. Their worlds were divided among the Coalition species. Their technology studied and filed away, their history reduced to cautionary tales. "Admiral," called her aide, Commander Junseek. "The emergency. Council is ready for your briefing." Stood up slowly, her scales shifting from deep blue to worried purple. The Emergency Council meant representatives from all 12 coalition species. Getting them together usually took weeks of planning. This time, they had all arrived within 6 hours of receiving Dongsu's message. The council chamber was a circular room with seats arranged so that no species sat higher than others. In theory, this made everyone equal. In practice, the stronger species still made most of the decisions. Realm walked to the center platform and activated the holographic display. "Fellow council members," she began, "what I'm about to show you will challenge everything we thought we knew about human capabilities." The display showed the footage from the Harmony's edge. The council members watched in silence as the massive ship materialized from nothing. When the identification message appeared, several beings made shocked sounds in their native languages. Chancellor Myongjun of the Aquarian Federation was the first to speak. "This has to be some kind of trick. Humans never built ships that large. Their biggest vessels were barely big enough to threaten a single planet." "That's what we thought," Bo-Ram replied. "But our analysis confirms the hull composition and energy signatures are definitely human in origin, just more advanced than anything we've seen before." High Counselor Wansu of the Xanthari Republic stood up, his insect-like body clicking with agitation. "Where have they been for 300 years? Why are they returning now? And why did they choose to reveal themselves in such a dramatic way?" "We don't know," Bo-Ram admitted. "But we need to make contact. I'm recommending we send Ambassador Teho with a diplomatic mission." Several council members began arguing at once. The Draconians wanted to send a military fleet. The Xanthari demanded answers before any contact was made. The Aquarians worried about their colonies in former human space. The smaller species just looked scared. "Enough." Bioram's voice echoed through the chamber. "Fighting among ourselves won't solve anything. Ambassador Teho is our most experienced diplomat. If anyone can make peaceful contact with these humans, it's him." Ambassador Teho was a thin, elderly human from one of the few remaining human colonies. He had spent his entire career representing the scattered human survivors in coalition politics. Most council members barely noticed him during normal sessions. Now he was suddenly the most important person in the room. "I accept the mission," Teho said quietly, "but I should warn you. If these humans have been hiding technology like this for 3 centuries, they're not the same people I represent. We may be dealing with something entirely new." 3 days later, Teho's diplomatic ship approached the edge of the Terran graveyard. The massive human vessel was still there, hanging in space like a dark mountain. Smaller ships moved around it in complex patterns, but none had left the restricted zone. "This is Coalition Ambassador Teho requesting permission to approach," he broadcast on all standard frequencies. "I come in peace-seeking dialogue between our peoples." For several minutes there was no response. Then every screen on the diplomatic ship flickered and changed. A woman's face appeared, and Teho felt his breath catch in his throat. She was clearly human, but something was different. Her eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever, like looking into space itself. Her uniform was unlike anything in Coalition records, made from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Most striking of all, she wore insignia that suggested a rank higher than anything in the Coalition military. "Ambassador Teho," the woman said, and her voice carried authority that made veteran officers stand straighter. "I am Captain Jinne. Of the Terran Stellar Navy, you may approach, but be aware that your vessel will be scanned and analyzed. Any hostile action will result in immediate destruction." Teho swallowed hard. The woman's tone was polite but absolutely certain. She wasn't making threats, she was simply stating facts. "Understood, Captain. I come seeking peaceful dialogue between the Coalition and your people. Dialogue is acceptable. However, you should know that we have been observing Coalition activities in this sector for some time. We are aware of how former human territories have been distributed among your member species." The diplomatic ship moved closer to the massive vessel. As they approached, Teho could see more details of its construction. The hull wasn't just scarred from battles. It had sections that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, flickering between solid matter and something else entirely. Captain Janae, Tejo said carefully, the Coalition has assumed for 3 centuries that humanity was extinct or reduced to primitive survivors. Your reappearance raises many questions. I'm sure it does. However, we are not here to answer questions about our absence. We are here to reclaim what was taken. The words hit Tejo like a physical blow. Taken? Ambassador, the Coalition has administered former human territories according to standard protocols for abandoned systems. No theft was intended. Intention is irrelevant. Former human space is now occupied by Coalition species. This situation will be corrected. On the main screen, Captain Jinne's image was joined by a tactical display showing the entire sector. Red markers appeared on every system that had once been human. There were hundreds of them, now home to billions of Coalition citizens. What exactly are you proposing? Tejo asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Evacuation of occupied. Human systems will commence in 72 standard hours. Coalition forces and civilian populations will withdraw to their original territories. Compliance is not optional. Tejo felt his heart sink. Captain, you're talking about displacing billions of beings. Many of these worlds have been Coalition territory for centuries. Families have lived there for generations. The Coalition had 300 years to establish its own worlds. Human space was never legally transferred or abandoned. We are simply reclaiming our property. And if the Coalition refuses? Captain Jinne's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. For just a moment, Tejo glimpsed something vast and terrible, like staring into the heart of a star. The Coalition will not refuse. The screen flickered and changed again. This time it showed a view of space around the massive human ship. Dozens of smaller vessels were visible, but as Tejo watched, the image seemed to multiply. The same ships appeared to exist in several places at once, like reflections in broken mirrors. What am I looking at? He whispered, a demonstration. What you see is one ship existing in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. We can create as many copies of our vessels as needed. The Coalition's numerical advantage is meaningless. Tejo stared at the impossible display. If the humans could duplicate their ships through some kind of dimensional technology, then even the massive Coalition fleet would be useless against them. I need to report this to the Coalition Council, he said. Of course. Tell them this. Humanity has returned to reclaim what is ours. We have no desire for conquest beyond our original territories. But we will not be denied. The countdown begins now. The transmission ended, leaving Tejo alone with his thoughts and fears. He had come seeking dialogue and found an ultimatum. The humans weren't asking for their worlds back. They were taking them. As his ship turned toward Coalition space, Tejo wondered if the galaxy was about to witness the end of 3 centuries of peace. Admiral Myung-ho stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Unity's Sword, watching 200 ships move into formation around him. The Fifth Fleet was the Coalition's most powerful force, built to handle threats that individual species couldn't face alone. 3 massive dreadnoughts formed the center of the formation, surrounded by cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels from 12 different worlds. Sir, we're approaching the Kepler 442 system, reported Navigation Officer So Young. The human vessel should be visible on long-range sensors in 30 minutes. Myung-ho nodded grimly. Kepler 442 had been a human colony world 300 years ago. Now it housed 2 billion Xanthari citizens and served as a major agricultural center for the Coalition. The humans had given them 72 hours to evacuate. The Coalition's answer was the Fifth Fleet. Admiral, called Communications Officer Jae-min, we're receiving protests from the colonial government. They want to know why we're bringing a military fleet to their system. Tell them it's a security exercise, Myung-ho replied. He didn't want to cause panic among the civilians. The official story was that they were investigating unusual energy readings. Only the fleet commanders knew they were preparing to face the legendary human supercarrier. The truth was, Most of the Coalition Council didn't believe the humans were a real threat. Yes, they had one large ship with strange technology, but the Coalition had 200 ships, including weapons that could crack planets. The humans were vastly outnumbered. Contact on long-range sensors, So Young announced. Bearing 27 Mark IV, it's... Sir, that's definitely the ship from the reports. The main screen flickered and showed the massive human vessel floating near Kepler 442's third moon. Even at this distance, it looked impossibly large. Dark metal hull stretched across space like a floating mountain, covered in scars and strange symbols that seemed to move in the light. All ships, this is Admiral Myung-ho, he broadcast to the fleet. We are here to enforce Coalition territorial claims. The human vessel will be ordered to withdraw. If they refuse, we will use necessary force to remove them. Captain Dong-wook of the dreadnought Stellar Hammer responded first. Admiral, our weapons are charged and ready. Just give the word. Other captains confirmed their readiness. The Coalition had brought enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Surely one human ship, no matter how large, couldn't stand against them. Open a channel to the human vessel, Mao-ho ordered. The screen changed to show Captain Jin-Ae's face. She looked exactly the same as in Ambassador Taeho's recordings, but somehow her presence felt even more commanding through direct communication. Admiral Myung-ho, she said before he could speak, you have brought an impressive force to our reclamation operation. Captain Jin-Ae, you are in violation of Coalition territorial law. This system belongs to the Xanthari Republic under legal settlement rights. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The consequences, Jin-Ae repeated, and something that might have been amusement flickered in her eyes. Admiral, are you familiar with the concept of dimensional phase variance? I don't care about your technology, Myung-ho snapped. You have one ship. I have 200. Simple mathematics says you should surrender. Mathematics, Jin-Ae said. Softly, yes, let's discuss mathematics. The screen went dark for a moment. When it came back online, it showed a tactical display of the system. The Coalition fleet appeared as blue dots arranged in their attack formation. The human ship showed as a single red dot near the moon. Then the red dot began to multiply. What am I looking at? Myung-ho demanded, but his tactical officer was already shouting reports. Sir, multiple contacts appearing around the human vessel. Energy signatures identical to the original ship. They're everywhere. The tactical display showed the impossible truth. The single human ship had become dozens of ships. Each one was identical to the original, down to the smallest detail. They surrounded the Coalition fleet from every direction, above and below, forming a perfect sphere of overwhelming force. This isn't possible, whispered Captain Dong-wook over the communication channel. Ships can't just duplicate themselves. Dimensional phase variance? Jin-Ae's voice came through clearly. We exist in multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. What you see as one ship is actually the same ship experiencing different probability states. We can manifest as many copies as needed. Lieutenant So Young stared at her sensors in terror. Admiral, I'm reading 47 identical ships. No, wait. 63. The number keeps growing. Myung-ho felt sweat running down his back despite the bridge's cool temperature. His 200 ships were now surrounded by an ever-increasing number of human vessels, each one larger than his biggest dreadnought. This is some kind of illusion, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You can't have that many real ships. Shall we demonstrate? Jin-Ae asked politely. Before Myung-ho could respond, the space around the Coalition fleet filled with movement. Tiny points of light streamed away from the human ships like angry insects leaving a hive. Thousands of them, moving in perfect formation. Fighter craft launching from all human vessels, So Young reported, her voice shaking. Estimated count, over 10,000 contacts. But as the fighters came closer, it became clear they weren't normal craft. They moved with impossible precision, making turns that should have pulverized any pilot. Their flight patterns were too perfect, too coordinated. No living being could fly like that. They're not piloted, realized Tactical Officer Min Young. Those are autonomous combat units. Each one is controlled directly by the ship's computers. The human fighters swept through the coalition formation like a school of fish flowing around rocks. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they performed what could only be called a demonstration. In the space of 30 seconds, everything changed. Every coalition ship found its shields flickering and failing. Not from weapons fire, but from some kind of energy drain that bypassed all their defenses. Warning lights flashed on bridges across the fleet as power systems struggled to compensate. "Sir, we're losing shield power," reported Engineering Officer Kyung-soo. "The fighters are doing something to our energy grid." Then the weapons stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, but simply turned off. Every gun, every missile launcher, every defensive system in the coalition fleet went dark at exactly the same moment. "This is impossible," Miao-ho said, but the evidence was right in front of him. "How are they doing this?" The human fighters continued their demonstration. They disabled the coalition's engines next, leaving 200 ships floating helplessly in space. Then they shut down the life support systems for exactly 10 seconds before turning them back on. Just long enough to make their point clear, Captain Jinei's face appeared on every screen in the fleet simultaneously. "As you can see, Admiral, your mathematics were incomplete. We could have destroyed your entire fleet in the time it took to disable it. Instead, we chose to demonstrate our capabilities without unnecessary loss of life." Miao-ho looked around his bridge at the terrified faces of his crew. Every system showed red warning lights. His mighty fleet had been reduced to floating metal in less than a minute. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Nothing from you, Admiral. We want the coalition to withdraw from human space. This system will be evacuated within the next 24 hours. Your fleet will escort the civilian transports to ensure their safety. And if we refuse?" Jinei's expression didn't change, but her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You will not refuse. Your ships are currently defenseless. Your crews are alive only because we allow it. Do not mistake our mercy for weakness." The human fighters began returning to their carriers, moving in the same impossible formations. As they docked, several of the human ships began to fade, becoming transparent before disappearing entirely. The demonstration was over. "Admiral," So-young whispered, "our systems are coming back online. Shields, weapons, engines, everything is working normally again." Miao-ho stared at the tactical display. The human ships could have destroyed them all. Instead, they had delivered a message more powerful than any weapon. The coalition's military superiority was an illusion. These humans had technology that made their greatest fleets look like toys. "All ships," he said heavily, "prepare to withdraw. We'll escort the evacuation transports as requested." As the Fifth Fleet began its humiliating retreat, Miao-ho wondered if the galaxy would ever be the same. The humans weren't just back. They had returned as something far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. High Counselor Wansu paced around the emergency meeting room like a caged animal. His insect-like body clicked with agitation as reports flooded in from across coalition space. The humans weren't just taking back Kepler 442, they were appearing everywhere at once. 17 systems in the last 6 hours, announced Intelligence Director Haijin, her voice tight with stress. Human ships have materialized in every former human territory. They're not attacking, but they're making their presence known. Admiral Bioram slammed her scaled fist on the conference table. "This is impossible. No species can coordinate operations across that many light years simultaneously. Even our fastest communications take days to reach the outer systems." "These aren't normal humans," said Counselor Minho of the Aquarian Federation. His webbed hands trembled as he reviewed the latest reports. "The footage from Admiral Miao-ho's fleet shows technology we don't understand. Ships that exist in multiple dimensions, fighters that move without pilots, weapons that disable our systems without firing a shot." Director Junho of Coalition Military Intelligence activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red markers appeared on hundreds of worlds, each one a former human colony now occupied by coalition species. Blue markers showed human ships that had appeared in the last day. The pattern is clear, Junho said grimly. They know exactly which systems used to be theirs. They have detailed records going back 3 centuries, and they have the technology to reach all of them at once. Wansu stopped pacing and stared at the display. How is that possible? Our fastest ships take months to cross the galaxy. Even with quantum communication, it takes weeks to coordinate fleet movements. We don't know, Hyjin admitted. But the evidence suggests they can move through space in ways we can't understand. Maybe through those dimensional phases Captain Jinne mentioned. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Coalition had spent centuries building their civilization on the assumption that faster-than-light travel had limits. Trade routes, military deployments, even diplomatic relations were all based on the time it took to move between systems. If the humans could ignore those limits, everything changed. What are our options? Asked Chancellor Myeongjin, though. His tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Borum activated her personal display and pulled up military deployment charts. We have 43 fleets scattered across Coalition space. Our largest concentrations are around the core worlds. But if we try to defend every disputed system, we'll spread our forces too thin. And Admiral Myeonho's experience suggests our fleets might not be effective anyway, Minho added quietly. 200 ships disabled in less than a minute. Our weapons couldn't even target their fighters properly. Wansu resumed his pacing, clicking sounds growing more agitated. There has to be something we can do. The Coalition represents 12 species and over 2 trillion citizens. We can't just surrender to one group of returned humans. Director Junho cleared his throat nervously. Actually, sir, there is one option we haven't discussed, the void cannon. The room went completely silent. Even Bioram's scales stopped shifting color. The void cannon was the Coalition's most secret and terrible weapon, hidden in a classified facility in the neutral zone. It could tear holes in space-time itself, theoretically capable of destroying entire star systems. You can't be serious, whispered Hyjin. The void cannon has never been tested on anything larger than an asteroid. We don't even know if it would work against these human ships. And if it fails, Boram said slowly, we'll have revealed our ultimate weapon for nothing. The humans will know we tried to destroy them completely. Junho activated another display showing technical specifications that hurt to look at. The weapon works by creating controlled tiers in reality. If these humans are using dimensional technology, the void cannon might disrupt their abilities, force them back into normal space where our conventional weapons could work. Or it might make them angry, Minho pointed out. We've seen what they can do when they're being polite. Do we really want to find out what happens when they're not? Wansu stopped pacing and looked at each council member in turn. What are you all saying? That we should just give up? Hand over hundreds of worlds without a fight? Sir, Hyjin said carefully, reports are coming in from the occupied systems. The human ships aren't attacking civilian populations. They're just waiting. Some of our colonial governors are already organizing voluntary evacuations. Voluntary? Aram's voice rose to a roar. Those are Coalition worlds. Citizens who've lived there for generations. Citizens who watched Admiral Myeonho's fleet get disabled like it was made of toys, Minho replied. Word is spreading fast. People are scared. Director Junho pulled up more intelligence reports. We're also seeing something else. Some of our member species are withdrawing their fleets from disputed systems on their own. The Zenthari Republic has already recalled 3 fleets to defend their core worlds. The Draconian Empire is consolidating their forces around their capital system. They're abandoning the Coalition, Wansu realized. They're more afraid of the humans than they are committed to our alliance. Can you blame them? Asked Hyjin. We built this alliance to defend against threats we understood. Pirates, rebels, the occasional space monster, not humans who can appear anywhere instantly with technology that makes our best weapons useless. Bahram stood up slowly, her massive frame towering over the conference table. So what? Are we saying that 3 centuries of coalition expansion was meaningless? We're going to let these humans reclaim half the galaxy just because they have better ships? Maybe, said a quiet voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Tejo entering the room. The elderly human looked tired and worried, but his expression was thoughtful rather than defeated. Ambassador, Wansu said, you're not authorized for this meeting. I know, but I've been in contact with Captain Janae again. There are things you need to understand about what's happening. Bahram's scales shifted to angry red. What kind of things? Tejo walked to the center of the room and looked at each council member. The humans aren't lying about wanting only their original territories. I've seen their star charts. They're not claiming any systems that weren't originally human colonies. That's supposed to make us feel better? Junho asked. They're still talking about displacing billions of people, but they're also offering assistance with the relocations. Ships, supplies, even new worlds in unclaimed space. They don't want a humanitarian crisis any more than we do. Hygiene frowned. Why would they help evacuate people from worlds they want back? Because, Tejo said slowly, I don't think this is really about territory. Captain Janae mentioned something during our last conversation. She said humanity has been watching the coalition for the entire 3 centuries they've been gone. They know about every threat we've faced, every crisis we've survived. Watching us? Wansu stopped clicking and stared at the ambassador. From where? I think they've been in those other dimensions they keep mentioning. Close enough to observe, but hidden from our sensors. The question is, why reveal themselves now? Why risk a war with the entire coalition just to reclaim worlds they abandoned centuries ago? Minho's webbed hands gestured nervously. You think there's another reason for their return? I think, Tejo said carefully, we should ask them. Directly, because if I'm right, the humans aren't our enemies. They're trying to protect us from something we don't even know exists yet. The council members looked at each other with growing unease. The idea that humanity's return was somehow connected to a larger threat was both terrifying and oddly comforting. At least it would mean they weren't alone in facing whatever was coming. What do you propose? Asked Wansu finally. Direct negotiations. Not ultimatums or military threats, but honest dialogue. Find out what they really want and why they're really here. Bahram's scales shifted back to thoughtful blue. And if they refuse to explain themselves? Tejo looked out at the holographic display of the galaxy, with its hundreds of red markers showing human ships. Then we'll know they really are conquerors. But if I'm right, we might discover that humanity's return is the best thing that could have happened to the coalition. Captain Janae stood in what could only be called the heart of the Eternal Phoenix. The chamber was vast and circular, with walls that seemed to be made of flowing light rather than solid metal. Streams of data moved through the air like living things, and the floor itself pulsed with gentle energy that responded to her thoughts. Incoming quantum communication from Coalition leadership, announced Chief Engineer Yunji, her voice echoing strangely in the dimensional space. Ambassador Tejo is requesting direct dialogue. He says the Coalition Council is ready to listen. Janae nodded slowly. 3 days had passed since their demonstrations across former human space. The Coalition fleets had withdrawn from most disputed systems, but she could sense their fear and confusion. It was time for truth, accept the communication. Route it through the secured quantum channel, full diplomatic protocols. The air in front of Janae shimmered and formed a holographic conference room. Ambassador Tejo appeared first, followed by representatives from the major Coalition species. She recognized High Counselor Wansu, Admiral Bahram, and several others from their intelligence files. Captain Janae, Tejo began formally, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. The Coalition Council has questions that need answers before we can proceed with any territorial arrangements. I understand, Janae replied. What would you like to know? Counselor Minho leaned forward, his aquatic features showing nervousness. The most basic question is this: where have humans been for 300 years? Your entire species disappeared simultaneously. Every colony, every ship, every trace of human presence just vanished. Jin'ei looked at each face in the holographic display. These beings had spent centuries building their civilization on the bones of humanity's abandoned empire. They deserved to understand what had really happened. We didn't disappear, she said simply. We transcended. Admiral Biorem's scales shifted to skeptical purple. What does that mean? Jin-A gestured, and the chamber around her became visible to the coalition representatives. They stared in wonder at the flowing walls of light and the streams of living data. 3 centuries ago, humanity discovered something that changed everything. We found the remains of an ancient network left by a species that existed millions of years before any of us. This network allowed access to parallel dimensions, alternate realities where the laws of physics work differently. Chief Engineer Yunji stepped into view, her body partially translucent as she interfaced directly with the ship's quantum systems. Show them the interface process, Jin'ei requested. Eunji nodded and placed her hand on what appeared to be empty air. Immediately, streams of light flowed from her fingers into the ship's systems. Her eyes glowed with the same energy that powered the vessel. Human consciousness proved uniquely compatible with the ancient network, Yunji explained. We can merge our minds directly with quantum technology. Our ships aren't just vessels we pilot. They're extensions of our thoughts and will. Navigator Sangwoo materialized beside them, his form flickering between solid matter and pure energy. The dimensional shift allowed us to experience time differently. While 300 years passed in your reality, we experienced thousands of years of accelerated development in parallel space. Teho stared at the display in amazement. You're saying humanity has been evolving in alternate dimensions for millennia while only centuries passed here? Exactly, Jin'ei confirmed. We built entire civilizations across multiple realities. Ring worlds, Dyson spheres, technologies that can reshape matter at the quantum level. What you see here is just the smallest glimpse of what we've become. Hi. Counselor Wansu clicked aggressively. If you've become so advanced, why return to our reality at all? Why not stay in your parallel dimensions? Jin'ei's expression grew serious. Because we've been watching. The ancient network doesn't just allow dimensional travel. It provides access to information from across the galaxy. We've observed every threat the Coalition has faced, every crisis you've survived, and we know what's coming. The holographic room fell silent. Admiral Biorem was the first to speak. What kind of threat? Navigation? Show them the deep space scans, Jin'ei ordered, the chamber filled with a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. At first it looked normal. Stars, nebulae, and the familiar spiral arms of their home galaxy. But then dark spots began appearing near the galactic core. The spots grew larger and spread outward like an infection. The Devourers, Sangwoo said. Quietly, an extragalactic species that consumes entire star systems. They strip planets down to their core metals, harvest the energy from stars, and leave only empty space behind. Director Haijin appeared in the Coalition display, her face pale. How long have you known about this? We first detected their approach 50 years ago, Jin'ei replied. They're still in the outer spiral arms, working their way toward populated space. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach Coalition territory in approximately 10 years. Counselor Minho's webbed hands trembled. 10 years? Why didn't you warn us sooner? Because you wouldn't have believed us, Jin'ei said simply. Would the Coalition have accepted warnings from humans you thought were extinct? Would you have changed your entire civilization based on claims from a species you considered primitive? The silence that followed answered her questions clearly. But now, Jin'ei continued, you've seen what we've become. You know, we have technology beyond anything in Coalition space. When we tell you that the Devourers are coming, you'll listen. Engineer Yunji activated another display showing detailed scans of the approaching threat. The Devourers aren't just another hostile species. They're a force of nature. They've consumed hundreds of galaxies over millions of years. They don't negotiate, they don't communicate, they just consume everything in their path. What do they want? Asked Teho. Everything, Sang-Woo replied. Matter, energy, the quantum structure of space itself. They leave behind regions where stars can't form and planets can't exist. Absolute emptiness. Admiral Burram's scales had turned gray with shock. Can they be stopped? Jin'ei looked at each coalition representative carefully. Alone? No, the coalition's current technology couldn't scratch their smallest ships. Even our advanced capabilities might not be enough if we face them by ourselves. But together? Wansu asked hopefully. Together we have a chance. The ancient network that allowed our transcendence wasn't built by one species. It was created by an alliance of dozens of civilizations working together against a similar threat. They succeeded, but it took everything they had. The chamber fell, quiet as the implications sank in. Humanity's return wasn't conquest or revenge. It was preparation for a war that would determine the fate of all life in the galaxy. What do you need from us? Teho asked finally. Time first, Jin'ei replied. We need to evacuate coalition citizens from the systems we require for our defensive preparations. These aren't random territorial claims. Every former human world we're reclaiming has strategic importance for the coming conflict. And then we prepare your people for technologies they've never imagined. We share what we've learned in parallel dimensions. We turn the coalition from a loose alliance of trading partners into a unified force capable of standing against extinction itself. Engineer Yunji stepped forward again. The process will change you, not like it changed us, but significantly. Your ships will need to be rebuilt with quantum interfaces. Your people will need to learn to think in multiple dimensions. Your entire understanding of physics will have to expand. And if we refuse? Jin'ei's expression remained calm, but her words carried absolute certainty. Then in 10 years, the Devourers will consume this galaxy just like they've consumed hundreds of others. Every species, every world, every trace of the civilizations you've built will be gone forever. The holographic conference room stayed silent for long minutes as the coalition representatives absorbed the truth. Their territorial disputes with humanity suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the approaching extinction. How do we begin? Wansu asked quietly. By trusting us, Jin'ei replied, and by preparing your people for changes beyond anything they can imagine. The galaxy is about to discover what it truly means to unite against a common enemy. The transport ships arrived at Earth in groups, carrying leaders from across the galaxy. High Counselor Wansu pressed his face against the viewport as his vessel approached the legendary homeworld of humanity. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about the planet. Earth was supposed to be dead. The historical records were clear. Nuclear wars, environmental collapse, and final evacuation 3 centuries ago. The planet should have been a burned wasteland, useful only as a monument to a failed species. Instead, he saw paradise. Blue oceans sparkled under golden sunlight. Green continents bloomed with forests and grasslands. White clouds drifted peacefully across skies that looked cleaner than any world in coalition space. Cities of crystal and light dotted the surface, connected by streams of flowing energy that pulsed like arteries of life itself. This is impossible, whispered Admiral Biorem from the Draconian transport ship. Her voice came through the secure communication channel that linked all the coalition vessels. Earth was completely dead when our survey teams examined it 200 years ago. Ambassador Teho responded from his own ship, wonder clear in his voice. The humans didn't just return to reclaim their territories. They healed their homeworld. The coalition fleet consisted of 50 ships carrying every major leader in their civilization. Presidents, admirals, high counselors, and chancellors from 12 species, all coming to witness what Captain Jin'ei had promised would be humanity's final demonstration. Director Junho activated his ship's deep scanning systems and immediately regretted it. The readings made no sense. Earth's surface temperature was perfect across every continent. The oceans teemed with life forms that shouldn't exist. The atmosphere contained exactly the right mixture of gases to support hundreds of different species. simultaneously. The entire planet has been restructured at the molecular level, he reported, his voice shaking. Every ecosystem has been optimized. This isn't just terraforming. This is complete planetary resurrection. As the Coalition fleet entered Earth's orbit, they could see more impossible sights. Massive space elevators reached up from the surface, but instead of simple cables, they appeared to be made of crystallized energy. Space stations orbited the planet in perfect harmony, their designs blending organic curves with geometric precision. Incoming communication from the surface, announced Counselor Minho's aide. Captain Jin'e is requesting all Coalition leaders meet at the coordinates she's transmitting. The coordinates led to what had once been the ruins of New Geneva, humanity's last capital city. Now it was something entirely different. A vast crystalline amphitheater sat where the old city had been, surrounded by gardens that seemed to glow. With their own inner light, one by one, the Coalition shuttles landed on platforms that materialized from thin air as they approached. The leaders stepped out onto surfaces that felt warm and alive under their feet. The air itself hummed with energy that made their skin tingle. Captain Jin'e waited for them in the center of the amphitheater, but she wasn't alone. Dozens of humans stood with her, each one radiating the same strange authority she carried. They wore uniforms that shifted and flowed like liquid starlight, and their eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire universes. Welcome to Earth, Jin'e said, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater without any technological amplification. Welcome to the world that humanity has chosen to rebuild as a symbol of what's possible when a species transcends its limitations. Engineer Yujin stepped forward, her form flickering between solid matter and pure energy. What you see here was accomplished in the past 72 hours. We took a dead world and restored it to life using techniques we learned in parallel dimensions. High Counselor Wansu found his voice first. 72 hours? You rebuilt an entire planet in 3 days? Time works differently when you can manipulate quantum states directly, Yujin explained. We accelerated the restoration process by accessing multiple timelines simultaneously. What appeared to take days actually required thousands of years of work compressed into a single moment. Admiral Bilram's scales had turned completely white with shock. This is beyond anything we thought possible. No species in Coalition records has ever demonstrated planet-scale reconstruction, because no Coalition species has learned to think. Beyond three-dimensional space, replied Admiral Seokjin, his uniform shifting to display star maps that seemed to move and breathe. Your civilizations are still bound by linear time and single-reality physics. Captain Jin'e gestured toward the gardens surrounding the amphitheater. But this isn't why we brought you here. The restoration of Earth is merely a small demonstration of what we've learned to accomplish. The air above the amphitheater began to shimmer and change. A portal opened, revealing depths that made every Coalition leader step backward in instinctive fear. Through the opening, they could see impossible vistas, worlds that existed inside out with gravity pointing in all directions. Dyson spheres that contained entire star systems. Structures so vast, they curved beyond the horizon of comprehension. This is humanity's true civilization, Jai said quietly. Millions of worlds across hundreds of parallel dimensions. Technologies that reshape reality itself. Resources that could rebuild the entire galaxy if necessary. Navigator Sangwoo activated controls that existed only in his mind, and the portal view changed. Now they could see fleets of human ships that dwarfed even the massive Eternal Phoenix. Vessels that looked like living mountains of crystal and metal, each one capable of creating or destroying star systems. The ship you've seen, Sangwoo explained, is what we consider a small patrol vessel. Our actual defensive fleets exist on scales that your current mathematics cannot calculate. Through the portal, the Coalition leaders watched construction. Projects that hurt their minds to perceive. Humans were building ring structures around entire galaxies, creating networks of interconnected realities that span distances beyond measurement. Director Haijin collapsed into one of the amphitheater seats, overwhelmed by what she was seeing. Why are you showing us this? Are you trying to terrify us into submission? No, Janae replied, and for the first time since they'd met her, she sounded almost sad. We're showing you this because we need you to understand the scope of what we're preparing to face. The Devourers have consumed civilizations that made even this look primitive. The portal view changed again, showing the approaching threat in terrible detail. The Devourers weren't ships or creatures in any sense the Coalition could understand. They were living voids, regions of space where matter and energy simply ceased to exist. As they moved through the galaxy, stars went out permanently, leaving behind areas where even light couldn't travel. They've consumed over 300 galaxies, Admiral Seokjin said grimly. Each one contained billions of species, trillions of worlds, technologies that would seem like magic to both our civilizations, all gone, all reduced to absolute nothingness. Ambassador Tejo stood up slowly, his elderly frame trembling. And you believe we can stop something like that? We believe we must try, Janae answered. The alternative is the end of everything. Not just death, but complete erasure from existence itself. The portal closed, leaving the Coalition leaders standing in the peaceful garden amphitheater. The contrast between the beauty around them and the horror they'd just witnessed was almost too much to bear. What happens now? Asked Counselor Minho. Jin-A looked at each Coalition leader in turn. Now you return to your people and prepare them for changes beyond imagination. We will begin sharing our technologies, but slowly. Too much too fast will shatter minds that aren't ready for transcendence. And the territorial disputes, Wansu asked, are no longer relevant? Jin-A replied simply. The Coalition will continue to govern as it always has. Your people will keep their homes, their cultures, their independence, but you will do so under humanity's protection. Admiral Beoram's scales shifted to confused gray. Protection, not rule? We have no interest in ruling lesser civilizations, Admiral Seokjin said, and his tone held no insult, only statement of fact. Governance is a responsibility we transcended long ago. We serve now as guardians, watching over the galaxy while preparing for threats that could end everything. As the Coalition leaders prepared to return to their ships, Captain Jin-A made one final announcement. The Devourers will arrive in exactly 10 years, 4 months, and 16 days. When that moment comes, you will witness the true meaning of unity. Every species, every world, every form of life in this galaxy will stand together or fall separately. The Coalition shuttles lifted off from Earth, carrying leaders whose understanding of the universe had been fundamentally changed. They flew in complete silence, each lost in thoughts too large for words. High Counselor Wansu stared out at the restored Earth as his ship departed. In his personal log that night he wrote only a single entry. Today we learned that we are children playing in a sandbox, protected by giants we never knew existed. Tomorrow we begin growing up. The galaxy continued as it always had, but everything was different now. Trade routes remained open, borders stayed the same, and the Coalition governed as before. But now, when pirates threatened shipping lanes, they simply vanished. When natural disasters struck isolated worlds, impossible aid arrived from dimensions beyond naming. In the deepest archives of Coalition intelligence, a new file appeared with the highest possible security classification. It contained humanity's true status in the galactic hierarchy. The designation was simple but absolute. Ascended, threat level, immeasurable. Disposition, guardian. And in the space between spaces, in dimensions that existed parallel to reality, humanity's true fleets maintained their eternal watch, waiting, preparing, and protecting a galaxy that had finally learned the meaning of humility.